রিভার্বটা কেটে দিন, রিভার্ব।
Clear?
1 second. Oh yes.
Eh?
Yeah, we start.
Okay. Okay.
Namaste, Maharaj.
Namaste, namaste, namaste. A bit late.
Can we start? Are we ready to start?
Yeah.
Maharaj, and good evening to everyone joining in the US. And I know there are quite a few joining from India as well, so good morning there. We are continuing with the series that we call the Foundational Texts of Indian Philosophy. Today we are hitting a milestone in the 50th session in this particular series. And this is the 7th episode just on Sri RāMANUJA'S Viśiṣṭādvaita. And being a fan of ardent devotee of Shankaracharya's Advaita, I personally have immensely benefited from these 7 lectures on Viśiṣṭādvaita. So thank you, Maharaj, for the wonderful lectures. Prior to this, just to highlight to you, we had 63 episodes of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So this 50th is just on the foundational text. And so I'll put a link to that as well. And I was reading some of the comments that were made just recently on Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which have hit about 5,600 views on that, which is fantastic. And as you can see, these are not easily understood by just reading a text. Some of the comments were very heartening, and this is run by volunteers. So all of you listening are also volunteers. So my request is to like the YouTube video so that it reaches more people. You can make your comments there so that it reaches more people. We can always benefit from some volunteers who can do remotely on some video editing and promoting on digital. So if you are interested, have skills, please contact us. The final logistics is, those who are on Zoom, you know the process. Those who are watching on YouTube, you can type your comments on that. So the first hour will be just lecture. After that, we'll go through a Q&A session. So with that, Maharaj, please continue with our lectures today.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay. Now we are continuing our discussion on the Viśiṣṭādvaita philosophy. Till now, I was mostly quoting from RāMANUJA'S Gita Bhashya, Sri Bhashya, and also the well-known book that is Rahasya Trayasara. It's a famous book by Vedanta Desika. It's a very foundational work on Ramanuja philosophy during the later period of the evolution of the thought system. Now, I mentioned earlier a lot of important points related to the background. The most distinct contribution of Ramanuja's system to India's devotional heritage is his elaborate definition and description of Bhakti and Prapatti. Are two different terms. So sometimes Bhakti or devotion is considered to be an anga, means just a part, and Prapatti is angi, the sadhya, the ultimate goal. So in some context, Bhakti itself becomes the sadhya, the goal, and Prapatti itself becomes a part of Bhakti. So it could happen both ways, Swatantra and Anga, both dimensions of Prapatti. So try to explain this. No one can begin his devotional life without some aspect of Prapatti. Prapatti, of course, means Sharanagati. And according to Ramanuja system, Sharanagati has got 6 important elements. The most important part of Sharanagati is Sharanagati itself, Atma Nikshepa. And the other 5 elements constitute different aspects of this Sharanagati, Atma Nikshepa. That is Anugulyasya Sankalpaka, Pradikulyasya Varjanam, Rakshasredi Vishwasa, Goptrutta Varanam Tatha, and Karpanyam. These are the 5. And Atma Niksheva Karpanye Shadvidha Sharanagati. That's how it concludes in the books like Lakshmi Tantra and other important works belonging to the Sri Vaishnava Bhakti tradition. The most important element is this Sharanagati or surrender, self-surrender. But Sharanagati as the highest peak of Bhakti can be found in many other religious devotional traditions like Christian mysticism and especially in the Russian Orthodox mysticism, and in some ways maybe in Sufism, which of course is not fully recognized by the mainstream Islam, but it is origin in its fusion with the Upanishadic mysticism of India. So we will discuss this Bhakti, Prapatti distinctions. So Bhakti as a traditional approach, it is very elaborate, and you need to know something about scriptures. You should follow certain rituals, certain traditions, and also you should have a lot of self-confidence. You should have a strong willpower. Then only you can make progress in Bhakti. But in Prapatti, there is an element of total helplessness, Karpanyam. And as a result of this, one's own conviction of being totally destitute, totally incapable of taking care of your own spiritual needs, you totally surrender yourself to the Lord. Closing of the bargain. So there is a helplessness. One feels that one cannot practice any of the rituals, doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't have the intelligence, or any of the resources necessary to follow a ritualistic discipline of bhakti. At that stage, you give your complete responsibility to the Lord. And that is Prapatti Sharanagati. But bhakti proper, Lord Krishna himself says in the Bhagavad Gita, and interestingly, Lord Krishna says, a bhakta should have a strong sense of self-confidence. Sandushta sadatam yogi yatatma dridhanishchayaka. So Lord Krishna himself in the Bhakti Yoga, the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhakti Yoga, he himself says, a bhakta, a devotee should have a sense of inner contentment, inner fulfillment, and also self-restraint, yatatma, and also dridhanishchaya, a strong willpower. Without a strong mind, you will not be able to face the challenges and difficulties in your spiritual life. Now, this is almost the opposite of Prapatti. In Prapatti, you become totally convinced of your own inability, your own total helplessness. That's why Karpanya. Karpanya means one's own helplessness, being a destitute. And that leads to Mahavishwasa in the RāMāNUJA'S language, in the language of mainstream Vaishnava system. Rakshasyaditi Vishwasaka. Bhagwan Rakshasyati. The Lord will protect me. That's strong faith. So that is closely linked to, and it actually emerges from a conviction of one's own inability, one's own total helplessness. So you also feel that you cannot even read the scriptures. You cannot understand the meaning of the Shastras, Upasanas. And you have no time. You are impatient. So you just turn to the Lord and close the bargain. So once you close the bargain, then you don't ask for anything. Your entire responsibility is given to the Lord. So that's the main difference between bhakti and prapatti. But as I mentioned earlier, prapatti has got two levels, two dimensions. One, the supreme prapatti, the supreme sharanagati, the supreme self-surrender, which I mentioned just now. You become totally convinced of your own inability, your own incapacity to study scriptures, to follow disciplines. So you completely surrender. That's the ultimate prapatti, ultimate self-surrender. But even in the ordinary bhakti tradition, in the bhakti practice, suppose you want to go to a temple, you want to perform meditation, it's a bhakti discipline, of course. For that you need a willpower. If you have got any other difficult, any challenges, any difficulties, any other obstacles, you should have you have a strong mind to confront those obstacles and to stick to your own decision. I will go to temple, I will go to meditation, I will practice japa. It is strong faith is needed. And also along with that, you should also have a little bit of prapatti. Not the ultimate prapatti, sharanagati, self-surrender, but strong faith that the Lord will protect you. Otherwise, you won't be able to develop a strong willpower, which is necessary to stick to your bhakti upasanas, bhakti disciplines, in spite of difficulties and obstacles. So that's one thing. Secondly, in bhakti, you already have the self-confidence that you will be able to practice meditation, puja, etc. In prapatti, you feel totally convinced that you are not in a position to do anything, everything by Lord's will, by Lord's grace, God's grace. The kripa is an important element in prapatti. And of course, there is another important problem. In the traditional bhakti lineage, Normally, bhakti used to be practiced by people who were in some ways born into certain social circumstances where they could naturally imbibe many of these devotional values. So then only bhakti was practiced. But on the other hand, you find in the lives of many great saints who were born in very, very difficult, very unfavorable social circumstances. By the sheer devotion, the purity of their mind, by their sheer devotion, they practiced self-surrender. And they became great saints, great spiritual teachers. So that happens only due to Prapatti or Sharanagati. So Sharanagati or Prapatti or self-surrender has this effect of complete transformation, a complete transformation coming in your life. A person may become a saint once he completely surrenders himself. Surrendering, he means his ideas, his emotions, his feelings, his mind, his intellect, his ability to do whatever is possible. He surrenders all these at the feet of the Lord, and the rest of his life is like an instrument in the hands of the Lord. So that actually brings in a tremendous power to this prapanna. So prapanna is a person who has practiced prapatti, the one who has surrendered. So when you surrender, you make a total surrender of your whole life to the Lord, then you feel a strange power and a strange sense of inner fulfillment coming over in your life. Because, you become a tool in the hands of a much higher power. So, the higher power uses you as an instrument for some higher purpose. And that's how sometimes people who are not born into very favorable circumstances, they became so great epoch-making spiritual teachers because of this self-surrender. And the second important point is with regard to the practice of karma yoga, Raja Yoga, which includes a lot of mental restraint, power, controlling the senses and emotions and feelings. So, normally a person who is practicing Bhakti Yoga or Bhakti will do everything as an offering to the Lord. But a person who has done this Prapatti or Sharanagati, for him, everything happens by the grace of the Lord. So, he doesn't have to make an offering. Everything for him is an expression of the grace of the Lord. And again, for a bhakta, a devotee, he will have to be patient. He will have to continue his spiritual disciplines in spite of long delay in getting any results. But a prapanna, or a person who has practiced prapatti, who has surrendered himself to the Lord, he is not anxious about anything. He is not worried about some results happening as part of his spiritual discipline. He has not thought about what happens to him. For him, his mind, body, his intellect, everything has become part of the divine. That's a very important thing to remember. And again, Bhakti Yoga is very steep. It's like climbing a steep hill. But when you practice Prapatti, everything becomes simple. Mukam karodi vachalam pangum lankayide girim yekruvatamaham mande paramananda madham. Even Gita Dhyana sloka I find. Even the one who cannot speak, even if the one who cannot open his mouth and speak a word, he may be deaf, he may be dumb, that person becomes an eloquent speaker. A person who may be lame, he cannot walk, he may be physically handicapped, he is able to cross the mountains. So, Pangum Langayadegiri. So, you may be lame, but you are able to climb the mountains when you practice this self-surrender. But self-surrender or Prapatti requires, on the one hand, and to do that, he requires a tremendous willpower and purity. And once the self-surrender is done, he doesn't worry about anything. For him, everything is a play of the Lord. He has surrendered himself to the Lord. So, these are some of the important differences. And second difference I already indicated earlier is that Prapatti or self-surrender brings about a complete transformation in our life and in our achievement. But Bhakti, this sudden transformation doesn't happen. Prapatti or self-surrender happens in one split second. Maybe for many this self-surrender is possible, it becomes possible as a result of long years of practicing devotion. But then the self-surrender itself is a matter of split-second decision. It is closing the bargain in our life. We are not worried about anything else. So it is a complete transformation. Sometimes it may be a tragedy in one's life. It may be an astonishing event. Maybe in some cases it may be you get some experience in your life which is the most unmistakable sign of God's grace for you, God's grace on you. So you became totally convinced that God is a reality. For most people, unless they get some kind of a mystical, we may call it mystical for want of a better word, suprasensory, so to speak, experience, till we get that kind of, some kind of transcendental experience, which is actually a kind of inner experience. Without that, God becomes just a word, G-O-D, with a capital letter G. That's all. It's just a concept, an idea. We may go to temple every day, 3 times a day. We may pray and meditate. We may go give long lectures on devotion. But still, it may not have become a reality. Of course, we believe in God. We are fully convinced that God is a reality. But that reality has not become a physical reality. Like, for example, now the time is, let us say, 6:30 is the time. I don't have to believe it is 6:30. It's because it is 6:30. We know that. You don't have to believe that you are in San Francisco. There is no need to believe because it is a physical reality. So when it becomes a physical reality, it's no more a matter of faith or belief. It's a fact. And you don't believe in a fact. You live in a fact. Or you live a fact. So, in bhakti, we are trying to believe, and we do believe, we are convinced, but still, God has not become a physical fact, reality in our day-to-day existence. But in Prapatti, in self-surrender, it happens when some experience happens in our life, which tells us that it is not just an idea, it's a physical fact. So, that's the difference between Prapatti and Bhakti. Now, in the 12th chapter, Lord Krishna gives certain stages of evolution. He elaborately describes certain stages in the evolution of bhakti or devotional discipline. In the 8th sloka, Mayeva mana tatsva, Mai buddhim nivesaya, nivasishyasi Mayeva ada udham na samsya. This is the 8th sloka, 8th verse of the 12th chapter of Gita. Lord Krishna says, at the highest level, a devotee, a person who is practicing bhakti yoga, he gets the feeling that Mayi eva manādasya mayi buddhim nivesaya. You dedicate, you offer your mind, your intellect, your emotions, your feeling, everything to me. And then I shall live in you. God says, Lord Krishna says, if you devote your mind, your thought, your feelings and emotions, Mayi eva manādasya mayi buddhim nivesaya. So buddhim nivesaya, mana nivesaya. You dedicate your mind and buddhi, mind and intellect, emotions and feelings and thoughts and convictions, all. You devote to me, you offer to me, dedicate to me. Then I shall live in you and you will live in me. That is, nivasishyasi, tvam mayi eva nivasishyasi. Means, when you do that, you start living in me and I start living in you. But remember, this is the highest peak of devotional discipline, bhakti yoga, at highest level. For a devotee of the highest order, he has given his mind, his thought, his feelings, everything to the Lord. And then what happens? Then that devotee starts living in the Lord. And the Lord starts living in that devotee's mind. But this is not possible for everyone. So Lord Krishna gives another alternative for those who have not reached this level of evolution. So he says, Ata chittam samadhatum na shaknoshi mayi sthiram abhyasa yogena tato mamichhaptam dhananjaya. Suppose you cannot devote all your thoughts and your mind and intellect, everything to me. Then what you should do? You try to practice abhyasa yoga. We already discussed this earlier. Sravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Bhada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam, Navadha Bhakti. You think of the Lord as your friend, as your protector. You listen to hymns about the Lord. You do puja, you do prayer, you read scriptures, and then you perform worship. These are different ways, 9 different ways of practicing Abhyasa Yoga. And gradually you will find you are able to devote your mind and intellect to the Lord. Then in the 10th verse, Lord Krishna gives another alternative. Abhyasepi asamarthosi mat karma paramo bhava. Suppose you are not able to practice Abhyasa Yoga, the Navadha Bhakti which I mentioned now, as mentioned in the Bhagavata Purana. Then what you can do? Then mat karma paramo bhava. You do everything as my work. I mean, by doing all your actions, thinking that those actions are meant for the Lord. Then, but slowly you will reach a higher level of perfection. And then in the 11th verse, at the lowest level, Lord Krishna says, Ata etatapya shaktosi kartum madhyogamasidhaha sarva karma phalatyagam tadakuryadatmavan. Suppose you cannot practice this, doing everything in the name of the Lord. You do one thing, you do whatever you are doing, your everyday activities, going to office, going to factory. You may be employed in different professions, different careers, different academic or professional levels. You may have a lot of duties and responsibilities. Okay, you do everything, but mentally you offer the results of all your actions to me at the lowest level. So in a descending order, Lord Krishna gives 4 possible levels of evolution of bhakti or devotion in the 12th chapter. So you can see these 4 levels of evolution. Mayeva manādasya mayi buddhim nivesya. The 8th verse, the 8th sloka corresponds to the state of the highest devotee. And then the 11th verse is the state of the lowest level of a devotee. But in bhakti, you have to slowly evolve. But the point is, in prapatti, in sharanagati, it doesn't happen. You reach a point where you feel this extreme karpanyam, that is a total feeling of helplessness, feeling of a destitute. And then you know what happens? Rakshasaridi Vishwasaha. God will protect me. And then all your thoughts become conducive to developing devotion. Anugulyasya sankalpaka. And all negative feelings disappear. Pradigulyasya varjanam. And then you practice Atmaniksheva, complete surrender. So, the truth is, for a very, very sincere, honest, pure-hearted person, Prapatti is like hotline to spiritual attainment, spiritual perfection. For others, Bhakti is the natural, but slow, very systematic way of practicing discipline, spiritual disciplines. That is Bhakti Yoga. So this is a very, very important discipline that you find in the yoga. Now, of course, I mentioned this earlier. This is called the Rahasya Trayasara. It's Vedanta Desika. Vedanta Desika is the greatest name in the RāMāNUJā system after RāMāNUJācārya. He was the one who actually established the RāMāNUJā system in a strong philosophical foundation. And he quotes one verse from Lakshmi Tantra, which is very Niksheva Papa Paryayo Nyasa Panjanga Samyutaha Sanyasa Tyaga Yuktukta Sharanagati Ityapi. So what is Sharanagati? So he says Panjanga Samyutaha, 5 angas. Angas means parts. Angi means that of which these 5 parts. So what is the most important part? Atma Nikshepa. Mentally surrendering oneself to the Lord's will. That happens. And when you do that, naturally you reach the highest level of spiritual attainment. It's a straight discipline that takes you to the highest spiritual progress. That's the idea behind. Now, one may ask this question, and this is a very important thing to know. I mentioned this earlier, there are 2 important principles in RāMāNUJA's this Sharanagati concept. That is, he has given a very elaborate description in one of his Gadya tribe. Sharanagati Gadyam. He wrote 3 Gadyas. One is Sriranga Gadya, Vaikunta Gadya, and Sharanagati Gadya. Gadya means. So, in the Sharanagati Gadya, for example, he says one is Akinchanyam, the other is Ananya Gaditvam. Means. So, RāMāNUJā and other Sri Vaishnava philosophers, they attach a lot of importance to what they call the Charama Sloka of Bhagavad Gita, the whole book. In the 18th chapter, 66th verse, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Saranam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishyami Māshucha. This is the Charama Sloka. It is not the last sloka. In a way, the last great statement, we can say, in the Bhagavad Gita. 66th verse of the 18th chapter. The meaning is this: you give up all your dharman, sarva dharman, sarvan dharman. So here dharma means all your efforts You try to go to the temple, want to do puja, you find you cannot do that. You try to practice karma yoga, you heard from different sources. If you practice your duty, if you practice karma yoga, if you do your duty with all sincerity, but leaving the fruits to the Lord, you don't worry. So, this is Bhakti Yoga, this is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga means doing all your duty without a sense of attachment or with total detachment. Mahatma Gandhi is called Anasakti Yoga. This is Karma Yoga. Or Lokmanya Tilak also wrote Gita Rahasya. For him, Karma Yoga is the Rahasya, the essence of Gita. And other great mystics considered Bhakti as the essence of Bhagavad Gita. So you try to practice Bhakti, puja, or maybe going to church or temples or places of worship, reading the scriptures, prayer, confession, everything you try to practice. Then you find that you are not able to do it regularly. Because the mind is weak, body is weak, mind is unsteady, body is sick. So what will you do? Mind won't permit you to do. You want to go there. You want to go to a temple or a church on a specific day. You feel helpless. You feel a kind of laziness, inertia. So you are not able to do, though you sincerely want to. So you cannot practice Bhakti Yoga. Mind is full of desire. You cannot practice the path of action without a selfish motive. You cannot practice detachment or non-attachment. So you cannot practice Karma Yoga. At Jnana Yoga also is not possible. You cannot practice Yama, Niyamas, etc. Raj Yoga also not possible. So what do? Well, Lord, I can't do anything. I'm sorry. I will leave everything to you. So sarva dharman parityajya. Give up everything. Mam ekam saranam varja. So one is you feel a total helplessness. You feel you are a destitute. So you cannot practice any of the dharmas, any of the yoga, jnana yoga, karma yoga, or bhakti yoga. And then you have no other goal, no other refuge. So it is called ananya gaditvam. So akincanyam and ananya gaditvam. These are two fundamental principles. The foundational principles of RāMANUJA'S Prapatti concept, which is very elaborately described in the Vedanta Desika's commentary on the 66th verse, Charama Sloka. Then what do you do? You practice Atmaniksheva, total self-surrender. So, Mam ekam saranam vraja. You take refuge in me alone. Don't look anywhere. If you go on looking all the doors, and there are so many temples, so many churches, so many places of worship. You give one knock, and the Lord is about to come and open the door, but then you have no patience to stand there. You go somewhere knocking another door. Again you are knocking another door. So practically no door opens because you don't wait there long enough, or you don't keep knocking at the door. You are trying to get water, so you dig maybe 1 meter, 2-3 feet here, then 2-3 feet elsewhere, then 2-3 feet in another place. You are not able to dig a well, you won't get water. So what happens is, you won't get the water, you won't reach your destination, you won't get anything. So the Lord says, Mam ekam saranam vraja. Ekam here means actually not looking for any other goal, not going in any other direction. That is ananya gaditvam. There is no other gadi, there is no other destination, nowhere else to go. When you reach this state, naturally a person is ready for practicing Prapatti. And when Prapatti is practiced, you begin a new life. In reality, if you look at the life and the radical spiritual transformation that happened in the lives of many of the mystics who were not born as mystics. Saint Francis of Assisi was a soldier. And Augustine himself was, his own mother was concerned about what he was doing, according to some historical accounts. So many of these mystics had very difficult situations, very unpredictable backgrounds. But something happened to them and they did practice Prapatti. Of course, this scientific analysis of this self-surrender as a devotional discipline that you find in the Sri Vaishnava literature, RāMΑNUJΑ'S system, that may not be found elsewhere. But as a spiritual fact, this is what all the great saints practiced, this self-surrender. And when you practice, it is like a new birth, a new life. So that's why there is there are certain ideas which explain as to where and how such a devotee who has practiced self-surrender should live. So the environment in which a devotee should live and how he should react with various people. So one important condition for every spiritual seeker is he should be or she should be very careful about where he lives and what sort of people he interacts with. Again, remember, this is actually not the state of a prapanna or a person who has surrendered himself, the highest type. But those who have not reached that state of Prapatti. So in Prapatti also, in some cases you find there's a gradual evolution called Prapatti becomes more and more a reality. So within the Prapatti practice itself, there are different levels of evolution. At the beginning you may practice self-surrender, but then sometimes you may forget you had surrendered yourself. That's because the mind is not completely pure. We surrender when we go to the temple, everything yours. Coming out, we bring ourselves back to our previous lives. It doesn't mean that you are failed, but because your Prapatti is not complete. Past samskaras, past impressions may again re-emerge and may bring us back and pull us backward. And you have heard the story of a great philosopher saint mentioned in the Bhagavad Purana. His name is Jadabharata. Jadabharata was a very interesting person. He was the greatest king and emperor of his times. Very noble-hearted soul. So when he became too old, he felt he should retire and he should retire into a forest hermitage and stay there spending his time in meditation. What we call tapasya, meditation, devotional disciplines, contemplation. He wanted to live a contemplative life. And he retired into a hermitage on the banks of a river, leaving his palace, his kingdoms, his empire, his ministers, his children, grandchildren, all behind. He came to the banks of a river, he put up a hut there, a hermitage, and stayed. And he was practicing discipline. So actually this is a kind of self-surrender only, but he has not reached the highest state of self-surrender. Without an element of self-surrender, a big emperor will not retire from his imperial life of luxury and power and wealth and go to a hermitage, living the life of a mendicant, begging his alms. So naturally he must have a sense of self-surrender. But he has not reached the highest state, as we are going to find out. And then after some years, what happened, one day he was sitting on the bank of the river and a lion was chasing a she deer, and as the deer crossed over the stream, a baby deer was born, and a poor little creature was floating in the water, in the water of the river. It was being, it was practically going to die. So the king plunged into the river, saved the little animal, the baby deer, and brought it up in the hermitage, taking care of the little animal. Slowly, he started forgetting his devotional practices. He stopped doing meditation, doing puja, reading scriptures. Everything was forgotten. His whole life was centering around taking care of this baby deer. So what happened after some years? It was time for him to die. So you can imagine his condition. A big emperor who led a very wonderful life as a king, as an emperor, as a ruler, left his kingdom and everything behind, became a mendicant, living in a hermitage in the banks of a river, always in a contemplative mood, meditation, contemplation and so on, suddenly started thinking of himself as the sole protector of a deer, of an animal. And he became so attached to the animal. The old man, he could not live for a minute without seeing the little animal, playing around the hermitage, his garden, etc. And it was time for him to die now, so he was always concerned about what will happen to the deer if he dies. And he was born as a deer in his next life. So, but the deer always remembered its past life. He did not forget that it was a big king, a big devotee. So it was afraid to go out of the ashrama compound, the hermitage. He lived always thinking in a contemplative mood. So when he died, it was born as a great saint. So you can imagine, a king became an animal, the animal was reborn as a saint. So what happens? On the one hand, the story shows that whatever little spiritual disciplines we practice will not go in vain. When the king died, though it was born as an animal because it was thinking of only the animal. It was thinking of only animal instead of thinking of God. The king was always thinking of the deer, so it was born as a deer. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyande kalebaram, you find in the Bhagavad Gita. Whatever form you contemplate on, that form will be yours when you are reborn again. So, when it was born again as a deer, it remembered its past life as a great saint, as a great devotee. And the deer died very quickly without ever associating with other animals, but it was thinking only of God because of past memories. And when it was born again, it was born as a great saint. Jadabharata, that's the name of the saint. So sometimes the Prapatti will take some life cycles to reach its highest fruition. But still, no effort will be wasted. That's why devotees who have done Prapatti but not reached the highest enlightenment, they should be very careful as to where they live. So you find the Rahasyatrayasara Vedanta Desika, he writes, Yet kinchidabi kurvano Vishnu rayatane vased, na kinchidabi kurvano Vishnu rayatane vased. Means, one should try to live in holy places where you get association of saints and sages, temples, or other holy places, shrines, where you are likely to come across other devotees, saints and sages whose association can reinforce our own devotional temperament, enrich our own spiritual life. It is very important. Even the highest devotee, if he has not reached the highest level of perfection, is likely to get his liberation delayed through some false, wrong association. That's why the idea that is found in the Yoga Sutra is frequently quoted by many of the Vaishnava commentators. That is Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha. 4 types of our attitudes. I mean, how should we interact with people? When we meet people who are of the same devotional temperament like ours, we should try to be friendly with them. So we should be friendly with other devotees, people who have the same devotional spiritual temperament like ours. We should try to talk to them. That will help us to enrich our own spiritual life. So Maitri. Karuna means sympathy. When we meet people who may not have progressed as much as we have progressed in spiritual life, we should not look down upon them. We should not belittle them. Rather, we should be sympathetic towards them. Karuna. Mudita means, and when we meet people, when we meet with people who are spiritually more advanced than us, we should be happy with them. We should not be jealous. We should be happy with them. And when we meet people who are totally different from us, Upeksha, there are people whose association can shake our own conviction, like toxic poison. Suppose we have our own spiritual disciplines that we practice, meditation, reading scriptures and so on. Then suppose every day we meet people who may tell you, well, you don't worry about the spirituality. After all, these are all superstitions. God is just a myth, just a attempt of the priest to deceive people, to collect money. People talk like that. They belittle everything, they criticize everything. They totally reject the role of spirituality in the evolution of human civilization. So they criticize spirituality, religion, and they bombard our mind with very negative thought currents. They are like toxic poison, because they can shake our own conviction. Why? Because we have not reached the highest level of perfection. When we reach the highest level of perfection, then our presence will transform others. But when we have not reached the highest level of perfection, we will be transformed by others. Negative associations can have a very negative effect on our own personality. It can disturb our spiritual life. So we should not hate them, but we should not go out of the way to befriend them. So we should practice upeksha. So Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha. These are 4 methods recommended by Patanjali. So many of the Vaishnavite commentators, teachers, they refer to this as the standard attitude of devotees while interacting with people. Here, you don't ever hate anyone, you don't dislike anyone. Those who are others, those who are like us, trying to practice spiritual disciplines, be friendly with them. Those who they want to practice spiritual discipline, they want to be devotees, but they didn't get an opportunity till now, be sympathetic and helpful to them. And there are those who are much more advanced, much more fortunate, spiritually more advanced than us. Be happy when we meet them. And when we meet people who may disturb our own convictions, who may question, who are cynical, skeptical about everything, keep a long distance from them. Physically, we may not be able to keep a long distance from them, but mentally, even when we listen to them, let them talk, but mentally, we should try to evolve a kind of mental filtering mechanism so that we automatically filter out all negative thoughts when people with negative temperaments bombard our mind with their own toxic material. So all these are very, very important for any standard devotee of God. We will discuss this with more details in the next session. Thank you. You are most welcome to ask questions. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thanks, Maharaj. Sriram. Okay.
Swamiji, you presented Bhakti and
Prapatti.
Prapatti as two distinct paths.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the Bhakta in one verse in the Bhagavad Gita is characterized by self-confidence or Atma-Vishwas, whereas the Prapanna is characterized by Karpanya or helplessness.
Yeah.
What is the role of Shraddha in Buddhism? Self-confidence appears to be Shraddha.
Yeah.
And another question, Swamiji, the
No,
eighth
you
verse
first
of the
question.
first chapter and then
Wait. Please wait.
verse of the...
No, you wait. When you ask one question, I shall answer because I will write down two questions I have to focus on. No. First
it's a very
question,
related
answer.
question, sir.
Then come to the next question. The first question. So, okay, now the point is, Shraddha. Shraddha is very important during the early part of our spiritual evolution. Very important. But when you reach this level of Prapatti, you must have already acquired lot of Shraddha. Without that kind of Shraddha, total dedication, a sense of sanctity and sacredness and contemplation, without that Shraddha, you will not be able to practice real self-surrender, Prapatti. So Shraddha is important for a Bhakta, but Shraddha is automatically a characteristic of any person who has practiced Prapatti. It's called a Prapanna. That's first. Please, next question, please.
A related question. The way you presented it and the way it's described in the 8th verse of the 12th chapter and 66 word, the Charma Sloka,
Yeah.
it appears that the culmination of Bhakti is Prapatti.
Yeah.
So a successful Bhakta will become a Prapanna.
Yeah. So in the RāMāNUJA system, there are two ways of explaining this. I mentioned this earlier. In the mainstream system is like this. Prapatti is a natural outcome, the natural destination, the result of Bhakti in its most sublime aspect, no doubt about it. So, when you consider this as a mainstream concept, the Prapatti is Anki and Bhakti is Anga. Prapatti is the whole and Bhakti is the part. Because without practicing Bhakti, one cannot reach Prapatti. So this is mainstream. Now another aspect. Without some degree of self-surrender, you cannot really start practicing Bhakti. How do you practice Bhakti without some kind of self-surrender? Not the highest Prapatti, but some degree you dedicate yourself to the Lord. Without that, you will not seriously think of doing sadhana, spiritual disciplines with great concentration for a long time. You don't do that. So in this respect, Bhakti is the main element, Angi, and Prapatti is Anga, is part. But so you have to remember, this is a bit intricate, but maybe this distinction is intelligible only at the higher levels of study of Sri Vaishnava philosophy. So I shall rather restrict myself to the first concept. So Prapatti is the natural result and the culmination of Bhakti. And that is the mainstream idea of commentators of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, that's an important thing. It's clear to you? You can ask further. If it's not clear, please ask again.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yeah. So two aspects of looking at bhakti and prapatti. In one aspect, prapatti or self-surrender is the natural result, because atma nikshepa is the most important element of these 6 elements. Anugulyasya sankalpaka, pratigulyasya varjanam, rakshasidi vishwasaha, goptrupta varanam tatha, atma nikshepa karpanni. Karpanya is in one way the real cause of the whole process. You feel totally helpless. So what happens? Then you believe, you come to, well, the Lord will protect me. Rakshasidi Vishwasaka. And Lord is the only protector I can think of. No one is Mamekam Sharanam Vracha. So you can find, Goptrutta Varanam, accepting the Lord as the only protector. The Ananyagadittu means called. So, and as a result of all this, Atmanikshepa comes. That's why Lakshmi Tantra says, Panjanga Samyutaha means. So, this Atmanikshepa is endowed with 5 elements, 5 parts. Panchanga. What are the Panchanga? One is Anugulyasya Sankalpaka, second Pratigulyasya Varjanam, then Rakshasidi Vishwasa, Mahavishwasa they call it, Goptrutta Varanam Tatha, the Lord is only Gopta, 4, then Karpanya, 5. As a result of this, Atmanikshepa comes. Again, I want to tell you, in reality, you're taking the whole thing out of the dialectical, theological, canonical context. Prapatti is the natural state of every sincere devotee. Every sincere devotee reaches this prapatti. It's not that you believe in prapatti, you just become a prapanna. Prapatti is a state of spiritual evolution. You reach there. You find many of the teachers in modern times, they will list out Arinyagaditvam 1, then Akinjanyatvam the second. It's almost like go to Trader Joe's, you ask for two items. I want apple, I want orange. It's not like that. These are the natural states of human evolution in the devotional path. It's not that we read somewhere and start believing in it. It is a state of inner spiritual journey. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Swamiji.
Gopinathji, you're next, and then Kandar.
Thank you. Swamiji, I recall reading somewhere that in the RāMANUJA'S system, you require to be formally inducted into by a teacher.
Yeah.
And so they call it the Bharanyasam. It's a process.
Yeah, the whole burden
Why do
given.
they have that when Prapatti is such an easy sort of access point?
Yeah. I tell you, that's where there's a dividing line between the spiritual and the theological. It's an important point. In Advaita also you find people will say first you should have all the sadhana sampatti, then you study the scriptures under a teacher, then you do upadesha. It is true. But in real life, it's a matter of our own evolution. How can you think of a man like Arthur, Paul Brunton, who just read something about Ramana Maharshi and Advaita, and he went to India, and then it was a complete transformation of his life. Or other great devotees who became, the hunter that we refer to, the great devotee, the poor man hunter who was offering meat to Shiva in a forest without the knowledge of the priest who used to come and do worship every day. So that is true. That's the difference between theology and spirituality. You are right. This Bharanyasa means giving this complete responsibility to the Lord that is there. That is, but I was trying to interpret it in a slightly different manner. I mentioned this earlier to you, you know. From a spiritual perspective, one is traveling from Dvaita through Viśiṣṭādvaita towards Advaita. But this will not be accepted by any of these traditional Advaita Acharyas, Viśiṣṭādvaita. Shankaracharya will accept, maybe RāMāNUJA'Acharya will also accept. But the theologians always have a problem in all religious traditions. So you are right. The role of a church in Christianity. So Christ did not build this, the man-made structure. So also in all systems, RāMāNUJA's system looks more like the theological, ecclesiastical heritage of Catholic Church. You can find this very interestingly. So you can find this Tengalai, Vadagalai. If you go to that, the elephant should have one kind of nama, another kind of nama. Then the whole thing will be lost. So maybe I'm not very much inclined to go to those aspects because, okay, your question is very valid and I'm very grateful to you. You put this question. So that kind of bharanyasa.
Implication in that.
Eh?
There is no philosophical implication.
No, absolutely no. I think, you know, when Vedanta Desika and then other later RāMāNUJA'S followers, and they became pontiffs of different ashramas and entities, they formed this theological superstructure, which is not necessarily a part of the spiritual aspect of RāMāNUJA'S system. The spiritual aspect of RāMāNUJA'S system is pure devotion. You can see the difference between a great mystic in Christian tradition and the Catholic Church, the Pope conferring, sainthood on a canonization of a saint who must have passed away 100 years ago. So this happens. So that's why I have a strong disinclination to deal with that aspect of the theological, the canonical problems. Yeah, right. Thank you for asking the question. Yeah, I'm very happy that we have somebody like you who put. But I can tell you interesting. See the greatness of RāMāNUJA's system and its pure humanism. For example, he says God is God's saulabhya, means easy accessibility, and jivas aginjanyam and ananekaditvam. So God is endowed with the power, Lakshmi, and also saulabhya, so easy accessible. So how do you reconcile the rigid theological superstructure and the easy accessibility, which is an important aspect of Sriman Vasudeva, Sriman Narayana in the RāMāNUJA system? Saulabhya is an important thing. The Lord is one of the most important aspects of the Lord is saulabhyam, it's called. How do you reconcile that concept with the rigid theological structure, like the laying of the hand in these hereditary thing? That you can find. Yeah, that you can find. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Very relevant question. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tandam.
Yeah.
Yeah, Swamiji, I have a question regarding the examples that you mentioned, like examples of people born in unlikely situations and all of a sudden, due to Prapatti, get into full transformation.
Yeah.
So, in these cases, how to see of the tougher situations that brought them to Prapatti? Because you mentioned there are two types of situations, like challenges in life, which can also bring you to Prapatti, and grace that is so much hard to believe that anything else could have made it. So God is the only two. The two cases, that the case of challenge, when there is unlikely very strong challenge that is the person is faced with, then how should that be viewed as? It is a reaping of bad karma of past, or is it a fierce grace of the Lord that pushes you to Prapatti.
Prayers can bring about a change in one's life. Prayers. So that is linked to the Saulabhya aspect. If a devotee opens his heart, the Lord comes straight towards him. So this is an important thing. So prayers and reading scriptures, doing everything with a sense of sanctity and sacredness as an offering to the Lord, all these can slowly bring about a gradual evolution. As a result of this, Prapatti becomes possible. Prapatti may sound very lucrative, very attractive, because it can give you a blank check without much effort. But that is a very wrong understanding. People may feel, well, I have already done everything, but that may not be factual, that may not be real. So there's a great danger in that. So a seeker, a spiritual aspirant, should slowly practice japa or prayers, and then bringing God into whatever we do. Karma yoga should be linked to our devotion to the Lord. That will slowly make Prapatti possible and natural in our life. Okay, thank you. Another, Sri Gobinath raised a very important question, So that's a problem when a devotional philosophy becomes a main doctrine, which may eventually, unfortunately, become the monopoly of a society or a community or a group. That also is monopolization of great spiritual ideals and teachings. This could happen. So it may not be deliberate necessarily. Vaishnavism came under serious threat and attack in the early time in Tamil Nadu during the time of the Chola kings who were Shaivites. So Ramanuja and his followers had to flee Tamil Nadu and come to Melkote in Karnataka, where they settled. They were given protection. So as a result of these early years of persecution, this system became a very rigid superstructure. So to that extent, some of his spiritual aspects may get lost or may be forgotten. Otherwise, it is a very humanistic and very egalitarian system. Then later it became something totally different. It becomes the monopoly of a community. It becomes identified with a specific community, following certain specific rituals, almost a monopoly. So you can imagine. But there is a deep spiritual humanism in it, but that can slowly get forgotten and take a back seat. This happens in many traditions. Okay, thank you for the question. Thank you. Okay.
There are no more questions, Maharaj, on YouTube.
Yeah.
Or nobody. So we can wrap up for today.
Thank you. So thank you for interesting questions. Okay. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.